All right, creation versus evolution, part 5. All right, we were here on this file. Copy this down. Want to follow along later on. And we got point 7 is the different points that defy the evolutionary theories or models. They're really not theories because there's no scientific proof of them. They're so large that we can't observe, report, falsify, do it over again, repeat. So, point 7, the elements in the sun are very different than those in the Earth and the other planets. Now you can look at this book here in the Creation Evolution Encyclopedia and get more explanation. And there are other websites that you can raise these questions and they'll confirm that these points are valid. Here's another point. Saturn's rings cannot be more than 10,000 years old. The rings of Saturn are mainly ammonia, yet it should be vaporized away. How could those rings have been formed? Why do its 17 moons never collide with its rings? How can Phoebe, the farthest moon, not collide with the others? Now, Dr. Baugh says about this, when our space probes were sent to Saturn, the mission discovered a very unique thing in their observations. It was found that the rings of Saturn are actually intertwined. They appear to be braided. All the laws of physics show that after several tens of thousands of years, this intertwining of the rings would have been lost, and the rings would have been amalgamized to this point where they were relatively uniform in composition. This means that someone designed them in their braided form just a few thousand years ago. So, the Encyclopedia, Creation, Evolution Encyclopedia, the rings of Saturn are mainly ammonia, yet it should vaporize away. How could these rings have been formed? Why do its 17 moons never collide with its rings? How could Phoebe, the farthest moon, not collide with the others? So it corroborates what Dr. Baugh was saying. We look at Venus. Craters on Venus are virtually undisturbed, indicating a young planet. There's a TV program, this article I wrote many years ago, but it's still relevant, where the revelations from NASA space exploration missions that led to the program that have put evolutionists in a quandary. The virtually undisturbed meteor impact craters of all over the planet of Venus, discovered by space exploration satellites sent to Venus, creates the impression that Venus has not been around for very long. If the planet were very old, millions, even billions of years old, then one would expect that the supposed volcanic eruptions or other meteor impacts or shifting of the planet's surface or other surface events such as rising mountain ranges would have disturbed the virtually undisturbed craters at least somewhere on the planet. But such is not the case. But all of the evolutionists interviewed on the TV show refused to acknowledge the possibility of a young Venus, and posited such unfounded theories as certain inexplicable catastrophic events that smoothed the surface of the planet over in recent times so that the meteor impact craters themselves were recent looking all over the planet. The total lack of consideration that Venus is young was quite revealing in the show. It implied they had no explanation, so they just offered something that was not really investigated. The sun is young. The sun is losing energy. It is losing a certain number of feet per hour in surface material. If you extrapolate back several tens of thousands of years, this means that the sun would have been appreciably larger, which means that the earth would have been scorched, thus eliminating the possibility of life evolving in the earth millions of years ago and necessitating an orchestrated short-term recent creation, perhaps by an intelligent designer. It also means that the gravitational pull of the sun upon the earth would have caused the earth to catapult into the sun. This again proves that you really don't have a lot of time to deal with. Now, Dr. Gish of the ICR maintained in a debate with Dr. Vincent Sarek at the Bakersfield, California Convention Center that a hypothetical primitive Earth would be evolving into today's Earth would be open to the energy of the sun unhindered by the total absence of ozone. This would destroy every living thing, so much the less create anything new. This then refutes an Earth which evolved, or that is old. A neutrino, Lubenow says, is an atomic particle so small that it can penetrate even the densest matter. A particle about as small as any in the universe. There are 3 types of neutrinos, but we will avoid technicalities here. A neutrino is as close to nothing as something can be and still be something. Actually, the neutrino was not discovered, it was invented. It was invented in 1932 when atomic scientists needed a nothing particle to make their equations come out even. So theoretically, they plugged it into and then they discovered it in 1955 as the real thing of representing one of the brilliant epics of science, of which there are many. So, later, Raymond Davis of the University of Pennsylvania developed a unique trap deep in the Homestake Mine, Deadwood, South Dakota, to detect neutrinos coming from the sun and test the theory of stellar evolution. Now, this experiment has been going on now for many years, 25 at this point, and this is many years after that. The results so far are a failure for the evolutionary theory of the sun and stars, and may be a support for recent creationism. Writing of the failure of the Davis experiment to confirm the theory of stellar evolution, Roger Ulrich, University of California, confessed it was a masterful understatement. The theory of stellar evolution is challenged in a very fundamental way. This discrepancy between the theory and observation raises the possibility that the theory is incorrect, so that our conclusions based on the theory can be no longer accorded confident completely. One thing we think we know about the sun is that it shines by converting hydrogen to helium. Hence, the helium content of the sun is dependent upon how long the sun has been shining. If we were to build the creationist model of the sun, one of the first things we would build into our model would be a low helium content based on the belief that the sun has been shining only thousands of years rather than billions. Yet this would possibly help solve the problem. We should have a model which would conform to these observations. The creationist model predicts what the solar neutrino experiment suggests is the true situation. The cause of the massive error also becomes obvious. To impose a 5 billion year evolution model upon the sun that has been shining only a few thousand years is to invite a massive error. So it is low helium content, and it is young. Of all the attempts over a 30-year period to resolve the solar neutrino crisis, the one possibility not even remotely considered by evolutionists is a recent age for the sun. The evolutionist's age for the sun and the universe represents his holy of holies, no trespassing is allowed. Trespassing. That's what the implications of the solar neutrino crisis are treated with such a holy silence. Only answer the questions that support your point of view. The shrinking sun. How old is the sun anyway? That's another article. Now I have Keith Davies. According to current models of stellar evolution, when a star like our sun is very young, its enormous output of energy is provided by gravitational contraction. As it grows older, the models show that the source of its energy should change over to that of nuclear fusion as it slowly develops a very hot and dense core. Where exactly does the sun fit into the sequence? Well, the standard model of the sun assumes that it is around 5 billion years old and that it has already passed into its nuclear burning stage. This makes it all the more extraordinary that in 1976, a team of Russian astronomers writing in the respected British scientific journal Nature showed how their research pointed clearly to the startling fact that the sun does not seem to possess a large, dense nuclear burning core. Instead, their results showed the sun as bearing the characteristics of a very young, homogeneous star that corresponds with the early stages of the computer models. The astronomers also proposed that nuclear reactions are not responsible for energy generation in the sun. They said that such a conclusion, although rather extravagant, follows from their own research into the analysis of the global oscillations of the sun and it is quite consistent with two other major observational findings. They cited these other evidences as being the observed absence of appreciable neutrino flux from the sun and the observed abundance of lithium and beryllium in the stellar atmosphere. So not only did the team of astronomers propose the startling idea that nuclear reactions are not responsible for the source of the sun's energy, but they also put forward the equally startling concept that the sun, according to their data, could be homogeneous throughout. Both of these revolutionary ideas would fit in perfectly with the concept that the sun is a very young star. All three of these major discoveries that point towards a young sun have been since confirmed by independent observations by others. This article will evaluate and update these findings and point the way to recent discoveries that show that the sun cannot possibly be the old nuclear burning main sequence star that it was assumed to be. Go back a few years, the Earth would have been scorched. You can take a look at this. First evidence for a young sun. Seismology gives us information on the structure of the Earth, so does the relatively new discipline of helioseismology provide important information on the structure of the sun. If the sun is an old star, then according to the standard model, it should have a large core reaching out to a distance of about 175,000 kilometers from its center and having a density of about 14 times that of lead. A core of such size and mass would, of course, have substantial effect on any global oscillations of the sun. In particular, the presence of such a large core would mean that the sun's global oscillations would range up to a maximum fundamental radial mode of oscillation of around 1 hour. Oscillations greater than 1 hour would involve such enormous amounts of energy that they would result in the complete disruption of any large core that might be present in the sun. So we're looking at this. If you keep reading, we find a young sun. The Russian astronomers were certainly startled to find that their observations of the sun were showing large and remarkably stable global oscillations with a period of 2 hours, 40 minutes, very close to that predicted for a young, homogeneous sun. When trying to explain this quite unexpected observation, they stated in the article that a most striking fact is that the observed period of 2 hours, 40 minutes is almost precisely the same as if the sun were to be in a homogeneous sphere. So we have comments from other astronomers. Then we have the second evidence for a young sun. Solar neutrino emission is that of a young star, not an old star. You can keep on reading. Now we have third evidence of a young sun. Lithium and beryllium abundance in the sun is consistent with that of a young star. Now we have lots of confirmation of this, and this goes way back. So we found more and more as we come up to this present age of 2020. The three major observational evidences that we just described in this article correlate with the expected characteristics of a young sun, a young star, that is obtaining its energy from gravitational contraction. The sun simply does not seem to have a large core that is very dense and has the high temperature that can sustain hydrogen nuclear burning. It hasn't reached that stage yet. In other words, the sun is definitely does not show the characteristics of a multi-billion-year-old star, but instead shows the characteristics of an exceedingly young star. That's a good article. A shrinking sun indicates a young sun. Matters of the shrinking sun, Andrew Snelling from Creation Ex Nihilo. And creationists are often accused by evolutionists of not quoting or referring to other scientists' work accurately or in context. This is particularly so when the doubts of an evolutionist can be misconstrued to imply he's given up evolution. Such impressions are never intentional. What our opponents forget is that quoting other scientists' work and statements is common practice, and conventionally such quotes are never intended to imply anything more about the author's beliefs, etc., than what is so stated in the statements quoted. Everybody tries to read into what everybody else is saying. Just read it. So